Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Madison Charlton from MLC Tech, and things just keep getting worse and worse for the world of tech and computing. Now, as I assume most of you know, there is currently a massive global conflict happening in the Middle East at the moment with Iran, and that conflict is brewing a massive semiconductor and memory supply chain disaster, which could derail the massive AI build-out as we are currently seeing, and also derail you people at home getting your hands on memory and semiconductors, because memory and semiconductors don't grow on trees and require vast amounts of energy to be able to produce them, and the current conflict is making that much harder. Now, the reason why this story is very significant is because, well, where do most of your chips and memory come from? Well, mainly Asian suppliers such as TSMC as the biggest foundry in the world at the moment in Taiwan, memory suppliers such as Samsung and SK Hynix over in Korea, and other semiconductor companies in Japan as well. And all of those ventures are heavily dependent on energy imports from the Middle East. We're mainly a tech-focused channel. We don't like to dive into the political landscape or the geopolitical landscape, but it's becoming more and more difficult as every day goes on to not have those two intersect, unfortunately. Now, I want to purely focus on my little corner of tech, but the world at the moment is making that almost impossible. And especially when geopolitical issues impact also on my field of research as well, in terms of AI optimization, sustainability of AI models, and how we can build AI to be sustainable from, of course, an environmental economical impact, but also mainly on a socially impact is where I focus on, but there is some overlap there. And now, the space of semiconductors and memory supplies, as we have already seen, very sensitive to supply chain disruptions. For example, we saw quite a big glimpse of that under tariffs under the current Donald Trump administration in the US, on how when the orangutan just threw out random tariffs, we saw massive disruption to the availability and pricing of consumer level hardware, and just how difficult these issues are for suppliers such as TSMC and Samsung to navigate as well. But with the ongoing war in the Middle East, projections are suggesting that Korean and Taiwanese suppliers are going to find it the most difficult to meet global demands if these tensions persist for several months. Now, Asian nations are very heavily dependent on energy imports from global suppliers, and right now with the global conflict in Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, which is a major choke point on shipping exports, particularly that for energy, oil, other natural resources such as helium, and specifically for manufacturers such as TSMC that account for a huge portion of Taiwan's energy demands, the lack of access to resource suppliers such as in Qatar for LNG, and other nations within the GCC for petroleum products. And with a fifth of the world's oil exports being cut off all of a sudden, and then Asian countries being particularly reliant on that Pacific pool of energy, it's going to be very difficult, especially for TSMC, who will find it very difficult to sustain their current operations, provided that their current geopolitical tensions extend into the several weeks. Isn't looking too promising, given the 3-day special holiday operation is now expected to last till September, which, if history repeats itself, is going to drag on for many years to come. Now, to somewhat picturise why this is such a big issue, let's take a look at this infographic here. Now, this shows us how 3 of the world's largest semiconductor nations, that being South Korea, Taiwan and Japan, are heavily reliant on energy imports from global markets, especially that from the Middle East. And the issue isn't just this heavy reliance on this energy, it's also about the fallback mechanisms that these Asian countries have, which are, well, very limited, which is going to be the greatest risk for any other nation in the AI supply chain or the semiconductor supply chain as a whole. And the issue isn't just the energy required to produce semiconductors, with it being reported that the most immediate risk for firms such as Samsung and SK Hynix is their dependence on helium imports from Qatar, which is used to cool silicon wafers during high energy stages of production. Given that DRAM supplies are currently focused on EUV lithography, helium is also essential for the cooling of sensitive components. So the cutting edge of modern day semiconductors in the AI supply chain, or the cutting edge of consumer hardware at home in your phones to your gaming PCs that are all produced on EUV lithography, it's going to have a knock-on effect, not just from yes, we are constrained on the energy we have available, but also the natural resources in order to produce these chips to begin with. Now, there are always going to be geopolitical tensions in this world when it comes to production and inventory of pretty much anything in this world. And many companies do account for potential risks, so this wouldn't be a significant issue if it was just a short-term wobble, or the orange man has a short-term wobble with the legality of his tariff, so he throws out another bunch because he's having a temper tantrum. However, this is a bit more than some orange buffoon having a temper tantrum, where actual conflict, actual war, doesn't just end after a couple days, or a few weeks, or even a few months. Given the current scale and state of the conflict, and how it's only getting worse by the day, this is going to be a major problem. The usual countermeasures that these fabrications usually employ, such as optimizing production processes, limiting output, or raising prices to account for higher shipping costs. Whereas something that we're currently seeing in the world as of today is a lot harder to account and plan around. This whole issue emphasizes the reliance on our own domestic energy production, or the domestic energy production of any nation to be self-reliant. We saw with the Ukraine conflict on gas imports how we had to make a massive shift to no longer being reliant on energy imports from the Russian states, and that also then made us more reliant on imports from states such as the Middle East. But regardless of that it emphasizes the need that we need our own energy dependence away from any other nation state, any other region of the world. We have to be reliant and produce our own energy. Yeah, not a fan, are you? Which is why we see nations such as China being able to ride the wave a lot easier, because they actually had the foresight to actually invest in their own energy production, renewable energy. Now, we can have the debate on a separate video on the implementation of renewable energy, the need for things such as wind turbines, other forms of renewable energy, solar farms. There is a massive debate to have whether that is more economically viable or more environmentally viable, etc. Emissions debate, etc. But that means nothing if you don't have the energy to begin with. This dramatically emphasizes the importance on investing in energy infrastructure and your own domestic energy production, because those nations that don't have to rely on anyone else for their energy, and especially for the production of AI infrastructure and semiconductor businesses, are the nations that are going to be the biggest power players going forth into the future. So nations such as China, who took the step back and invested heavily into renewable energy to power all of these AI data center ventures and national energy needs. What nation is going to benefit the most from this? And it's not any nation that we are from. It's not going to be the United States. It's not going to be any other Middle Eastern country. It is going to be countries such as China, who are able to be self-reliant on themselves, and because they're not struggling, they can center themselves as the global center of the geopolitical space and, well, the new world power going into the modern age. It is scary to think about, but also it really needs to highlight how lawmakers in the US, in the UK, really need to pull their finger out and really double down and realize the future ahead of them. Because it's all good saying, oh yeah, let's make more oil, import more oil, drill some more oil, and all of this stuff forget environmental policies, forget investing in all of this. We care about the oil now because we're going to save you money now and make all the energy now. And then in a couple of years' time, that reliance on that energy source has suddenly been pulled out of the way and you have been crippled. But hey, I guess that is the brilliant downside of when you engage in wars and implement policies that are so short-sighted that you don't care about anyone else apart from your short-term ego and short-term vision, that, well, the rest of the world around you collapses in the long term and your citizens ultimately suffer because of it. Whether that be it now, in a couple months' time, or in the next few years' time. This constant short-sighted approach, we're trying to get votes now, in this election, has really crippled the global power that these nations are going to have going forward. And quite frankly, it's been reckless. And, you know, politicians come and go, but ultimately the people at home, you people watching behind the screen right now, you're the ones who are going to suffer. So these rich people don't care. They'll ride off back to their fancy golf course or fly off to their yacht. It's not going to impact them. They've got so much money. Who cares about if you have to spend, an extra 100% on your energy costs? They can ride the wave. But you at home, you can't. And while we are mainly a tech-focused channel, I do want to leave you with this. When the rich wage war, it's the poor who die. Whether that be directly through conflict or indirectly from the fallout that follows, whether that be directly through means of conflict or through terrible economic policy which erodes your ability to live a life. But anyway, on that sour note, I'm going to get on out of it. I've talked about this for long enough now. Let me know all your thoughts and opinions on this topic down below. And how much do you think this will impact the current state of the semiconductor and memory market, given that the supply chain is already constrained in high supply at the moment, and this energy crisis now is going to be affecting the output of that already constrained supply? It's not looking good, but let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Anyway, I've been Madison Charlton from Naughty Tech. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video soon. Goodbye for now.